Good morning, students. We have started discussing the issue of how the world was changing, especially in Europe, whereby different principalities, different new kingdoms, and how the clergy was becoming important, how the aristocracy was becoming important. But, students, before we actually get into the details of it, one thing needs to be very clearly understood by you all is the fact that you have to really understand this. You would also have to kind of go into a bit of a flashback and try and understand that yes, we humans started as hunters and gatherers. This is something which I emphasize all the time. Now, when we were living this kind of a life, we had a very fragmented society. 10 people going there, 10 people in some other part of the jungle, probably 50 people in some other part of the jungle. Small villages, people usually minding their own business. Everyone out to explore the world around them, the best way to live their own lives. So that's how it was. But gradually, situation changed because we got into farming. And if you get into farming, then definitely you have to do a lot of hard work on that particular piece of land to grow crops and vegetables and those kind of things. So naturally, once you have worked really hard on that piece of land, you do not uh, uh, till the land, and you do not sow seeds and then you move into some other part of the jungle, or the plains, or any geography for that matter. You stay there, you make your hut, and you stay there because now you want the harvest to happen, right? And then gradually 10 people come and stay together, and then 50 people, and then 500 people, and that is how more and more people start living together. Their activities are different activities now start coming up, because someone would now, because now 500 people are living there, so someone would be taking care of probably some job which was related to carpentry. Someone would be taking completely would be completely responsible for tools, because now the tools that you need for hunting, the tools that you also need for farming. So then that's how the society got complicated and complicated all the time. And it was just a matter of that time, that in few hundred years, that more and more that we now had a situation where we had large villages, which large villages would become towns, and then towns would become cities, because now more and more people now started living together, got involved in different economic and social activities of their own. So naturally the whole society got complicated. But now, once you have a situation whereby now it is not just that 10 or 15 people are managing the lives of their groups, you have to now understand that all this kind of complexity needs efficient handling, it needs good management, it needs efficient administration. So because of this, now you started having institutions and offices like village headmen in India, or Mukhiyaji in India, what you would call him. And naturally they were known by different names in different parts of the world. So they a whole landed aristocracy developed around it, whereby few important people would be having a sway or control over thousands of people. Okay, because they were the ones with wealth, they were the ones with land, and they were the ones who controlled the maximum amount of resources, whether water, land, forests. So they were the ones who controlled it, and naturally they were the ones who were now a part of landed aristocracy. Okay, and once landed aristocracy happened, so gradually, guys, it is very obvious. Just consider the situation of Dehradun. Say if you have a feudal lord of Dehradun, and but he is eyeing the very fertile plains of Roorkee as well. So naturally, the feudal lord of Roorkee is not going to take it lightly, and then ultimately they get into a conflict, and whoever is able to hold the day and hold the fort ultimately ends up amassing a greater amount of, an even more greater amount of land and animals and the river water and everything. That's how the world and the society has evolved, and that's how the institution of feudalism came about, and that's what we are talking about here. So these lords, if you look at the second paragraph, these lords in turn pledged their loyalty to the greater lords, who were the vassals of kings. That is, the kings used to consider them very important guys. That is how it was, that the kings would be having his own set of vassals, where those people who would be, say, the king of, let's say, because now we are talking about local examples, so let's say the king of Uttarakhand. So naturally he depends for his support on the king, on the vassals that who would be known as vassals, that is the inferior or the people who would have the political influence of that, like in India you would call them zamindar sahib or the mukhiya ji, whatever, of or the low level kings of, say, Rudki, or you would say Masuri, or say Dehradun. Ultimately, that these people would also be very, very important. But then the king of Uttarakhand, if there was one, he would be the most important man. Everyone would be owing his allegiance and loyalty to him. So the Catholic Church, centered in the papacy, that is, papacy would mean the Pope, supported the state of affairs and its self possessed land. In a world where uncertainties of life, poor sense of medicine, and low life expectancy were common, the Church showed people how to behave so that life after death at least would be tolerable. So, guys, you have to understand that earlier it was about one segment of the society having all the land, all the resources, everything, and then the other section of the society was church. Now, no one was there to ensure the well-being of the people who were alive in the society, within the society, because very few people would hold the reins of power in a society. Okay, the economic reins of power, the social reins of power, everything. No one bothered about making life easy and better, improving the quality of life of the citizens. Those concepts were not there at that point in time. It was very, very optional. If the king wanted, he was under no obligation to. If he wanted, if he was a benevolent king, of course he would be worried about the welfare of his citizens. Otherwise, he is under no obligation to. Unlike what you have a system today, where every government who governs and which governs, it is morally obliged to work towards the better quality of life of its citizens. That is something which is non-negotiable today. Earlier, that concept was not so. So the church used to play the role of, okay, bhai, we can't do anything about the quality of life, but once you are dead, once you are gone, we can ensure your heaven and hell and those kind of concepts. Okay, we would ensure that you have a dignified death. No dignified life, but yes, we can ensure dignified death for you. So that is what was the role which the church used to play at that point in time in those years. And monasteries were created where God fearing people would devote themselves to the service of God in the way Catholic churchmen thought fit. Equally, churches were part of the network of scholarship that ran from Muslim states of Spain to Byzantium, that is Constantinople today, and they provided the petty kings of Europe with a sense of the opulence of the Eastern Mediterranean and beyond. Now, the influence of commerce in towns in the feudal order came to evolve and change, encouraged by the Mediterranean entrepreneurs in Venice and Genoa. Guys, Venice and Genoa both are port towns of Italy, okay, and they historically and traditionally have been extremely important trading posts, okay, where most of the trading which used to happen or rather the marine trading that used to happen in the Mediterranean and different parts of the world used to happen from there. They were extremely important. Some of the wealthiest people in Europe used to live in these towns: Venice, Genoa. Genoa, not that important today much, but Venice, of course, still happens to be a very important trading town, and of course a great center of tourism as well. But these are very important towns, and Venice, we all know about its great waterways and all of that. But Genoa is very important historically, students. If and you being students of history, I would particularly like to tell you that the very famous man, Christopher Columbus, was from Genoa. Okay, Christopher Columbus was from Genoa, and if you remember in class 10, you had studied about the unification of Europe, and you came across this gentleman, Giuseppe Mazzini. I'm sure you remember him. So Mazzini was also from Genoa, and of course, one of my favorite violinists, Niccolo Paganini. He is considered to be the god of violin, but then let me not go on here any further. Okay, so all these people came from Genoa. Okay, now their ships carried a growing trade with Muslim states and the remains of the Roman Empire in the east. Attracted by the lure of wealth in these areas and inspired by the idea of freeing holy places associated with Christ from Muslims, European kings reinforced links across the Mediterranean during the Crusades. Trade within Europe improved center on fairs and the port cities of Baltic and the North Sea, and stimulated by a growing population. Students, I had already told you yesterday that Mediterranean had too much of religion for a very small geography, where you had in the same area you had the Christianity which first came up, then you had Islam which came up from the same location. So naturally there was too much of religion, because there were holy sites for first it started with Christians. They had their holy churches, they had their holy sites, they had their holy graves and all of that, and then Islam came over. Then the Muslims started building their holy mosques and their own holy graves, and so there was too much religion for a very congested piece of geography. So conflicts were bound to happen, and it did. And both could just keep hands away from each other only for 400 years. Yeah, okay, in historical terms, 400 years is nothing. Okay, so Islam came 600 AD, and the Crusades started 1090, 1091. So the Christians and the Muslims could just tolerate each other and could keep the peace, or rather at least the semblance of it, only for about 400 years, and then it was a full-waged battle. And that is what started happening from 11th century onwards, because now it was basically, as you call it in English, now the gloves were off. Okay, now it would be the time for fist fights. So we shall continue tomorrow. Thanks.